I am very flattered to be invited to speak to you all today specifically as an organization because my interest in my interdisciplinary team is as an advocate for post-mining communities, and really as the social scientists in the group. I live in a different mining area from this coal mining region. We do have some coal mining in Michigan, but it's in a very different part of the state. We are in a copper and to some extent copper-silver mining region that is really unique in the world because the copper is largely formed as native copper. It's just copper in the ground. And we are surrounded by a halo of iron mining regions then around Lake Superior that surround us. Our mining heritage is like your mining heritage, as we all have some common experiences, but our environmental contamination problems are different than yours. Our mine structural problems are different than yours. But at the same time, I think we have a lot to benefit from talking to each other. And some years ago, a colleague of mine who is an energy policy and law scholar came into my office to ask about why we don't have much pumped or much hydroelectric power in the Keweenaw Peninsula, where we get 250 to 300 inches of snow a year. We have tremendous topography. And that kicked off a conversation about energy storage as the single greatest problem in the energy transformation that we're living through. It is the greatest change in infrastructure, in the human experience in the last 100 years, and will probably remain the most important one, setting aside AI and other developments. In that we need energy storage as a fundamental problem. The growth of intermittent and irregular distributed generation capacity from solar, wind, and other sources is such that we need energy storage. And the existing technology that is very mature for energy storage is pumped hydropower. It can be closed loop or open loop system. We've known how to do this for more than 100 years. When you have extra electricity or electricity is cheap, you pump water uphill. When electricity gets expensive or is needed, you drain the water back through turbines and generate power. It is a battery, not a generator. They were really rolled out in the United States in response to the expansion of nuclear power, because nuclear power plants like to get turned on and the engineers like to run them on. Humans don't use electricity that way, right? We use electricity a lot and then a little and then a lot and then a little, and we go up and down, up and down. Nuclear power plants don't like to go up and down, up and down, up and down. So instead we built these systems to capture that surplus power when it wasn't needed and regenerate then, replace some of that power when it was needed. This is the Ludington plant on Lake Michigan. It is, at the time, it was the world's largest pumped hydro facility. It's not anymore. It was started in the 1950s, and in the great age of pumped hydro storage production. When I speak in Michigan, I use this as an example because everybody understands it. And I can show them this picture, and we talk about everything in comparison to Ludington. It's a half Ludington or a third Ludington, or it's double Ludington, right? What's happening right now in the country and in the world is kind of like a gold rush related to energy technologies. And it's created this gold rush environment where everybody is talking about it. They're all excited about it. There are a lot of people out there looking to make a buck. And just like any mining rush, they're making a buck off investors, not off of actual mining or actual profits. In our conversations, we really got excited about the idea of how you can adapt all of Ludington, where we have these facilities that we know work. There's no question. 50 years old, they just rehabbed it. It's going to work another 50 years. 100-year lifespan on an industrial asset. The reason we don't build them right now in the United States is that the environmental footprint of them is enormous. And there are not many places on the Great Lakes anymore where you have elevation overlooking bodies of water where you could build a facility like that, because it's all national lake shore, it's national park, it's vineyards, it's very important geography. And my colleague Roman said, well, you know, what if we just put it all in a mine? And I was explaining to him how big the mines are. And this was the first drawing I ever made, and it's technically naive and inadequate, but actually shows basically how this idea works. And in our initial conversations, as we started assembling colleagues in mechanical engineering and in civil engineering and geological and mining engineering, all of the engineerings, we realized that you spend all this time talking about this idea and it's impossible to make any progress because there are so many variables. What kind of facility do you want to build? What is it going to do? Is it an old mine before 1970 with its closure, 19th century mine? Is it a mine coming to the end of its life? Is it a mine that's in development now in the planning stages? What is the purpose of the facility you're going to build? Are you the manager? Are you an energy company looking to make money? Or are you the owner and manager, are you the commander of a military installation that has national security concerns with your energy system? Like, those needs are totally different, and the solutions you might design are totally different. But as we kept talking about it, we kept thinking of how exciting this idea was. We put together the Keweenaw Energy Transition Lab, not unlike the lab from Penn State, with this effort of taking what is traditionally considered to be the liabilities of post-industrial communities and thinking about ways to convert those into assets. You have an abandoned mine that is a problem because of environmental contamination, because of population decline, and because of the geographic remoteness of this. The challenges faced by post-mining communities are very common. It turns out, as you start thinking about this design process, that it could be that those ideas are actually assets. If you're thinking about a pump hydro facility, the fact that you have a body of water without fish in it, that's an asset, right? As you think about these opportunities, I want to show you some examples, but we ran with this idea, and we have since expanded our laboratory in the roles that we do. We focus on issues of just planning and thinking about infrastructure, energy infrastructure, especially with opportunities for regulatory and legal and policy systems, thinking about inclusive and equitable processes in siting and design, trying to turn these liabilities into assets and push development away from greenfields and into constructive brownfield reuse that is harmonious with local visions. So the point about this is that for pumped hydropower, it's already been done. There's one of these operating in the world, and it's in Wales. They took an old slate mine, and they converted the different parts of the mine into a closed loop, I believe, closed loop system, pumping water back and forth between the parts of the mine. It's been operating for years, makes money. The energy people will argue about how much money it makes and whether it's enough money or not, but it's a successful infrastructure part in Wales, balancing the national power grid. Not only is it a successful example, but it sits within a World Heritage Area and one of the most important national parks in Wales. It has tremendous environmental, cultural, economic impact. And it already works, and they already did it years ago. And for some reason, nobody noticed. Because now, as we look at this idea, there are all kinds of people who want to sell you, the community organization, on this idea of taking advantage of this opportunity to help solve your problems. People always ask, How does this work? Where is it feasible? What are the potential benefits and what are the adverse impacts? And we've thought a lot about a lot of this, including things like water turbulence and mine structural stability. And what, I'm not going to go through all of them, but these are some companies that are doing this, doing this today in the space. And not just with pumped hydropower, or what we abbreviate as PUSH. But there are companies out there, you all added to my list for geothermal, but even geothermal that is not being used for HVAC, but, or heat pump work, but actually for electricity generation. There's a company in Nevada that's built a demonstration plant doing, I forget the term off the top of my head, but they have low temperature differential between the groundwater and the surface water. It's not a steam plant like you would find at Yellowstone, but they're using a low differential temperature difference to generate electricity from groundwater, not necessarily mine water. Mine storage, and Thomas, who's going to speak after me representing mine storage, is got 3 or 4 projects in the pipeline in Scandinavia. Hydrostore is a Canadian company using advanced compressed air, and Hydrostore has built several demonstration plants already and is rolling out into the market. These 2 technology systems, pumped hydro and advanced compressed air, are market ready and being implemented. And interestingly, Hydrostore, as an example, one of the demonstration plants that they built was a compressed air energy storage system in a Great Lake, where they actually had submerged the lower tanks under the compression of water to store the electrical energy, to store kinetic energy, to turn their turbines to generate electricity, which seems to me a kind of thing that could be adapted to a flooded coal mine without being drained, for example. But no one's ever tried to pencil it out. There are others here whose technology systems are less mature, gravity-based systems. There are these high-density hydro projects where they're using a manufactured fluid, and that fluid is contained within 2 bladders. It doesn't interchange with groundwater. Another example of a fluid which is used as a marine ballast, for example, in another application, in offshore wind power and shipping. That high-density fluid hydropower project essentially gives you the same power potential as standard water power, but at 1/3 the volume or 1/3 the head. And it seems to me the kind of thing that could be installed in a flooded coal mine without draining the water. But no one's ever penciled it out. And it didn't exist when West Virginia did its analysis, right? It's still an immature technology, but boy, it deserves attention. So don't take my word for it as an archaeologist. Governments and the stock market is giving these companies hundreds of millions of euros and dollars to develop these projects. So the question is, what can you as a community learn about these things to evaluate whether or not you are a feasible location to take advantage of this as an opportunity, and how do you shape what happens, right? So I'm going to tell you about our first project that we did, because I'm not at liberty to talk about our industrial or corporate partnerships and the groups that we're sponsoring, the groups that we are collaborating with who are developing facilities. Our first project was funded by a small grant from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. We assembled an amazing team of students, graduate and undergraduate students, a tremendous group of faculty and community organizations to work with them. And I'm actually going to flip the switch, because instead of telling you about the first study and then telling you about what the students did after, I'm going to tell you what they did after and then tell you about the study. Because after they completed the study, we had a little bit of resources left over, and so we kept a team working on a national evaluation of sites. And as no one in the room will be surprised to know, that our national databases for abandoned mines are woefully inadequate for almost any kind of planning. because they were built by staff of the U.S. Geological Survey out of the goodness of their heart. They were like just really interested data geeks, and they built this worldwide database of mining information that is the single largest database in the country. But it is not thorough, it is not complete, it was not systematic. It is what it is, but it's the most comprehensive database we have nationally. This is the students' output from just metal mines, because we had focused them on metal mines. We did not want them to look at uranium mines or lead mines, because we didn't want to deal with those environmental questions. We didn't want them to look at coal mines, because, my God, coal mines are a different kind of problem. We wanted to look at hard rock underground metal mines. So that's what this map represents. And as you've noticed from other maps earlier, it looks different, right? The maps of coal mines are very different. They then built a GIS analysis. They went through and filtered the analysis to look at mine size, and as best they could figure out the volume and the shape of the mine, which is not readily available in that data. But they ended up narrowing it down to 1,000 reasonable candidates, and they continued to work that list down to sets that they were pretty confident with. And then they built a GIS analysis around that, looking at things like load centers and demand centers, transmission infrastructure. They added in irregular generation from solar and wind, both installed and planned and potential, in laying out this map. And really, the long and the short of it is that there's more than enough capacity in abandoned mines, in theory, based on the data we have, to meet all the energy storage needs in the country. But they are not evenly distributed. But even that, remember this map, which shows the sort of blob up around the Upper Peninsula and the copper and iron regions, and then the rest of the hard rock mining regions in the American West, primarily, with a little in New York. This is just metal mines. It's not limestone quarries. It's not underground limestone mines. It's not uranium or lead mines. It doesn't include zinc. It doesn't include coal. It doesn't include any of those other kinds of mines, right? You could approach this analysis then two ways, because you could look at it and say, if I'm an energy company, where's my service area and where does it make sense for me to investigate? Right? But another way to look at this is if I am the Department of Defense, do any of these fall on my facilities? Again, very separate kind of question, right? Okay. That said, with the evolving technologies, some of which are market ready, some of which are emerging, and some of which are still people writing on napkins in the bar, and you shouldn't trust them, right? So we have this whole range of technology systems. We have since moved away from the techno-economic analysis, and I'll explain why. Specifically, what we're doing now is dealing with questions about social acceptance, and what are the potential benefits and the adverse impacts, and how do people think about these issues? And in our study, we've been centered on these questions that you will hear people talking about in City Hall, because our City Hall, just like city halls here, we're having the same kinds of conversations about environmental contamination, about brain drain, about economic development, about water quality, right? And if we want to shape the way these projects are developed, we need to understand the potential value and then create the incentives necessary through political pressure, if they're needed at all, to focus this development. So our first study, we were looking around for a community to do this study on in our area, and we found that the small town of Negaunee, which is an iron mining community, is serviced by, it has a municipal power system, and it's serviced by an energy cooperative that shares its data with us as an institution. And we were like, oh, that's perfect, because there's all kinds of historic mines in Negaunee. So we went to Negaunee to say, we want to do this study, and what do you think about it? And the people in City Hall said, well, that's really interesting. We'd love to participate in that, but that mine you're talking about, don't look at that mine. There was an accident in that mine. The miners who died, their bodies were not recovered. And if you start talking publicly about that mine, people will drive you from our community. Instead, go look at this other mine, the Mather. It's underneath the high school. I already saved the company, I don't know, $3 million because we didn't get to a 90% design phase or 80% design phase and then go for public comment, right? In going, we started to have these meetings. The mine is under the high school because when the mine closed, it ended up forfeiting the land over to the municipality because of tax abeyance, although the mining company in this case still has environmental liability for the site. The high school downtown was at that point old and they needed to relocate. They moved the high school up, reused some of the miners' dry house and stuff as they were expanding and building a new high school, so that now the high school is connected to the mine underground as a facility. That'll come back at the end. Figuring out what the energy potential was a process of doing a lot of historic and interviews in the public memory of the community. And a lot of the historic records are held essentially in two places. The State Archive holds the last set of mine records. All of the current stuff the mining company turned over to the State Archive. And all the old records, the earliest period of mining at the site, were donated to the local historical society. And the local historical society has them all in the crates they were sealed in 1969. The maps are still there, right? I am sure that we would find similar things throughout coal country where the little historical society combined with the state's database, between those two is where you find all the old engineering information. What was the size of the shafts? How was it built? What mining techniques were used, right? In this case, this is a mining system using block caving system, and we don't need to talk about the details. It doesn't really matter, but except that it was important for us in thinking about how the mine worked, what collapses had occurred, what is the probability that various portions of this mine are still three-dimensional or have been closed by collapse after flooding. We did our initial study drawing as quickly and efficiently as we could from one master map, a three-dimensional rendering of the mine. And we are since now working on a more detailed version of this from the more detailed maps. There are at least 870 maps of different levels and section views that we can compile into a master map, three-dimensional model. There are probably another 400 at least in the Historical Society still in crates that haven't even been opened yet, right? Of all that, and oh man, mind map modeling, where my gosh, you have my deepest sympathies. I know the work you've been through. We're working right now on two aspects of this where we're trying to use, we've generated an automated image processing process to improve the quality, the visual quality of the maps for modelers, with the intent then of now starting to build an algorithmic tool, an AI tool that will automatically connect and assemble all these maps into a single drawing, in theory, right? What I've learned about AI is that you don't need to be nervous about your job if you interpret historic maps. So it ended up, though, where we could then generate, based on very reasonable assumptions from our first model, we could say, okay, well, here's 5 design options, right? This is the volume and the head, which is what they really need to be able to run all kinds of business models. And as they're running all those business models, we compared them to Ludington, right? And the long and the short of it is this particular mine. Remember this random mine that the city staff just told us to go look at is big enough that if it were converted into a pumped hydro station at full charge, at full size, it would power all of Marquette County for 6 months with uninterrupted electricity. No one would ever build that facility unless, of course, you were the commander of a military base because your priorities are different, right? But it meant basically that there was potential to design a system that would work well and make money, and there's plenty of capacity and space within that environment to work with. Now, within that, comparing to Ludington, right, you can see the volume of water is about an order of magnitude lower than Ludington, but the head is about an order of magnitude larger than Ludington. The details of how that converts from megawatts to megawatt hours don't really matter for our purposes. The point is, there's a lot of energy potential. There's a lot of things we could do. Our student and faculty teams then analyzed different kinds of energy capacity scenarios. They did an economic feasibility analysis, generated a CapEx calculator using unique data points. They created a CapEx recovery plan. And the long and the short was that under some of models and some of these designs, they could make money, as is. A lot of them didn't. They ran in the red. But our math was generally very conservative and included no new incentives created. But in designing this as an example, the community said, we will give you the mine for $1. Your land acquisition costs are $1. And your reservoirs are already built, right? You can imagine what that does to CapEx on an energy project. I know energy is not everybody's jam here, but in that realization of you can design things that can function, and it might work with finding the right technology system for the right spatial capacity, for the right environmental structural situation, this can make money. So we started really thinking about social acceptance and how this could work, how we can steer this. And no one here will be surprised to know that energy companies are energy companies. Their job is to make money with energy, right? Mining companies are mining companies. Their job is to mine things and make money. Once a mine develops its plan and its remediation plan, that is such an arduous and difficult process, they don't want to talk about changing the mine plan. Energy companies are not going to solve your acid mine drainage problem. It's not their job. Their board of directors don't care about that. But if we can work together as a community, as a state, as a nation, to create whatever incentives are necessary to make sure that we make up the gap, the actual construction costs aren't much different in this one example that we looked at. Certainly that's going to vary widely, but we can identify those gaps and we can plug them if we want to push this development into brownfield instead of greenfield solutions, right? Because your batteries are going to require more mining. So the key here, one of the things that we've identified is that early community input is transformative in social acceptance of these designs. And I want to be very clear here, though, that these studies, this one cited here, occurred during COVID. So the public meetings that we had and things like that were not robust public meetings. They were smaller. But even still, in my experience since then with talking to people, people express common themes of concern. And if you can meet those concerns early in the design phase, it's negligible project cost. Things like people in Negaunee would talk to us about Ruby Lake is their surface lake nearby. It's recreational. It's very important to them. They said flat out, do not touch Ruby Lake, period. No one will be behind this project if you're going to touch Ruby Lake. Mercury runoff is a concern. We were able to study the mine to identify that mercury is not a problem so far that we've been able to sample in the mine water. But even still, we know that mercury does not come from the ore body. Mercury came from the fulgumite in the blasting caps that spread the mercury around inside the mine. Most of our environmental challenges don't come from the rock in the mine. They come from the downstream, the stamp mill tailings, the waste. That is what produces most of our ecological problems. But what that means is that if we design this system and we just capture a little bit of mercury each cycle over a 100-year lifespan, you could permanently remove mercury from this water table, period. People were concerned about bats. Our bats are really, they like abandoned mines, as many of you probably know. They also like hydropower stations, actually. And they're fighting against white nose syndrome, and it's causing real serious concerns. Can you, as you're reclaiming this mine, although this is the Quincy mine, but as you're reclaiming this mine, can you create and improve bat habitat? Yes, we can. Inconsequential project cost. And I might add, the evolving technologies that recommend solutions, again, not speaking as a biologist, but you could do things like here now where you're building a facility, it's operated and staffed and being run, where the best treatment for white nose syndrome that we know of so far right now is to irradiate the hibernaculum when the bats are gone. You zap it with really powerful ultraviolet lights. It kills the fungus in the mine so that when the bats return, they still have fungus, but they're no longer dealing with the burden of existing fungus growing in the hibernaculum, and it will improve survival rates. Although again, nobody's done that yet, right? Can you improve energy access and equitability in our community? Can you protect vulnerable people in our community so they don't get disconnected from their power? Sure. Can you create educational opportunities? Can you collaborate with our vocational technical training program at our high school, because it's right there at the site? Can you work with our electricians program and our trade schools? Yes, absolutely. Can you open up access to the property, make it safe and available to people? Yes, and not only that, but we can improve heritage value because we can open up the underground to tourism. Let the mining history group from the community museum bring people underground in the Mather mine now. The people at the Quincy mine, which gets about 30 or 40,000 visitors a year in the copper country, are so excited by the idea that they could install one of these facilities and then develop an entire new tour around the themes of energy and the environment and copper that would bring back people who have grown up there, visited many times, but haven't been in a while. We can do all of these things in one of these projects. It's a question of, can we as a community work to identify the value in this abandoned mine resource, generate sort of an initial risk analysis, and identify what our priorities are in the community and see how they can harmonize with the design. Now we're at a point where we'd like to create sort of a citizen science style program for post-mining communities to do this, right? Because individual parts of this are not rocket science, as we had our example earlier, but the way in which people can do it, just like what you're doing. You get help from the local colleges as you need to test water. You can use state agencies to help you determine things. And then you and your organization can put the word out to say, this is the resource that we have. This is what value we believe it has. And these are our priorities for solutions. And bring yourself to the table or get a seat at the table as a valuable partner in development rather than having the developments happen to you. Because I'm just going to remind you, as somebody who lives in a rural area where energy extraction and different kinds of extractive economies have operated for 150, 200 years, the urban cores and the wealthy parts of the country will continue to extract value from you, right? And as one final closing thought, I don't know what the current atmosphere is here in Pennsylvania for wind power or solar power farms, for example. Where I am right now in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, there's a lot of debate and people are not fans of offshore wind, offshore wind either, but terrestrial wind. But as we started talking about this idea, and people in our interest groups, from retired miners and their children to the environmentalists in the community, as they came together and talking about these things and began to see this big picture of how reactivating the underground in our community and making it a center of economic productivity in our community again can match with these independent energy generation systems, and it can have potential impact in our community. That brought people to say, okay. But no one ever talks to people about the whole thing. When they go for public comment, they want to know about this solar farm, about this drain outlet, right? This is what we hope to change. I look forward to corresponding with everyone. I've been taking notes furiously, and I know I have several days worth of emails to send already. I'm gonna hand things off now to a collaborator in the next presentation, but you'll make an introduction. Thank you.